Well, hi, everybody. I'm AJ Willoughby. Glad to be with you again on another Monday night product training call. And I'll tell you, we have got some really incredible testimonies that we want to share with you tonight. With Cheryl Christopher and Julie Ellis are joining us this evening. And we're so glad to have you all on the call. And we're just going to dive right in because I know people, let's forget all the fluff. Let's just get right to it. And we're going to start tonight with Cheryl Christopher. Cheryl, tell us a little bit. First, tell us just a little bit about yourself, and let's talk. We had a chance to meet this past weekend in Nashville at the M. Jamberry event that was going on, and tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, and everything first, and then we're going to talk about what's going on with you.
Sure. Hi. Well, first of all, I'm 48 years old, and approximately 8 years ago, I started suffering with pains, aches, hurting, all over, really. It was my arms, my knees, my back, the back of my neck. I mean, it just seemed like everywhere I touched, it hurt, and started going to, my primary care physician and seeing him about, what possibly could be the cause of this. And that's when all the fun tests began. Probably went through about 1.5 years worth of tests to rule out all the other ideas that they had that it could possibly be, until they finally diagnosed me in 2011 with fibromyalgia. And basically that is a disease of chronic pain and fatigue, where you have overactive nerves, and the nerves in your body in certain places, I guess there's, from what they say, there are a bunch of different pressure points or points on your body where you can ache. I had, I believe, 11 out of the 18 areas were super sensitive for me.
Wow. So and this was how long ago?
2011 was when they finally diagnosed me. So it probably started the end of 2009 when I started, feeling the hurt and everything.
So almost 10 years that you've been dealing with this pain and
Yeah.
the discomfort of all this.
It's amazing what you can get used to after a while, how you build up a tolerance to pain or just deal with it,
Yeah, oh yeah, I know. So many people, they do. So it was about how long ago was it that you started using the Core AO?
It wasn't immediately when it was made available to, I'm a Jamberry consultant. And when the products were made available to us, I waited like a week or two prior to purchasing my first boxes of Core and Go, and that was through the Roadshow orders that they had going on then. So it was, before it was available to us on our office. So I would say it's about a month.
So about a month ago was when
like 3 weeks to a month that I've been.
Yeah. So probably about, the Roadshow about 3 weeks ago or so when you started. And when you started taking the Core, about how long was it before you started noticing the difference, and what was the difference that you started noticing?
I would say it was probably a week before I noticed, like really noticed how good I felt. Most of the time, now we moved from Pennsylvania down to Florida a lot due to my condition. The cold weather in Pennsylvania and the brutal winters in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania they were really hurting me, killing me. I was not enjoying, I didn't have very good quality of life. I didn't like to go out in the cold and the snow and all of that, so I would stay in all winter almost. And so we moved to Florida in April. And the warmer weather makes me feel better, but I was never really able to be overly active. If I did too much or overdid it, I would lose a day. I would be down. That's the way I always called it. I was down for a day. If I did too much work one day, I would be down the next day for doing too much in one day. And after about 3 weeks to a month of using the Core AO, I've found that I'm not suffering those days that I'm down anymore. I don't have down days anymore.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Now
You're,
you used to work with your husband, didn't you?
Yes, yes, we worked as toll collectors out in the cold. So that was a brutal job, like we were out in the elements day in, day out, and it was that was a big part of it too, like I really had no relief. Like the work days were brutal, by the time I got home, I was done.
right. I think that's
Apologize. I apologize. Hold on. There we go.
So Cheryl, how would you describe the difference between your life just even as much as a month ago to where you are today?
Well, it's incredible. I mean, I've been, since I was diagnosed, I've been on so many terrible, terrible drugs. They started me on Lyrica. I took that for about 2 weeks. I think I was going to the doctors like every 2 weeks. They would try me on something. 2 weeks I would go back. They would see how I was doing. With Lyrica, I gained 80 pounds within a 2 to 3 week time frame. So they took me off of that, put me on Neurontin. I was taking I was taking 300 milligrams 6 times a day, or 6 of them a day. 300 milligrams of the Lyrica and then the Neurontin. And then they started me on hydrocodone, which knocked me out completely. I couldn't even function on that. So they switched me, it was like every other week they were trying something new. And I just felt like I was just drained and down. And it was terrible. It was really, really awful going through all the trials of, finding just the right point where I could tolerate what they were giving me. And the worst part was it was never taking the pain away. It never took it away. It just it made it bearable, like you could get through a day without having to go lay down and take a nap or just curl up in a ball because you hurt so bad, so it just made it manageable, took the edge off. The drugs did, but now
and today, now the difference that you're experiencing today, you've got a life back?
Yeah, I mean, my husband and I are doing landscaping work together. In the community that we just moved to, it's 55 and up community, and we are helping the people that can't get outside and do their landscaping work. We're going and doing their landscaping for them, putting down mulch, putting in shrubbery, trimming their hedges, stuff that if I would have done this prior to using the core, I believe I would have down days afterwards, definitely. But I haven't had any.
That's incredible. Well, Dr. Templeman, let's go ahead and go to you here. And for those that don't know, Dr. Fred Templeman, he is the foremost authority on the mangosteen fruit and botanicals that are out there. And, as far as anyone that would know, what is really happening and why, he's the authority in it. And we are so proud to have him as the head of the Scientific and Medical Advisory Board for M Network. And as far as really developing and formulating the products that we have within our sticks and what it is that they do. So Dr. Templeman, tell us a little bit. Obviously, Cheryl's had some very major difference in her life, experiencing all the pains and aches from fibromyalgia, even as far as a month ago, and now today, a totally different lifestyle. Why is that, and what's going on there?
Well, let me talk a little bit about fibromyalgia if I can first. Fibromyalgia is a relatively new disease in the sense that we have a name for it. We now have been able to investigate it enough that we have a fairly good understanding of the causes of it. But for the longest time, about 25 years ago, we thought it was an infectious cause because, first of all, the fibromyalgia configuration was described in Australia. And the reason that it came into the news was that it became a relatively controversial reason for Australians to be declared disabled by their government and to receive disability pensions. And the skeptics in North America thought that this was a scam that people had heard about in some kind of way and that it moved across into North America, or perhaps it was an infectious organism that was responsible for what went on. But there was enormous skepticism. And the reason that that skepticism existed at the level of doctors was because if you take one of these trigger points on a fibromyalgic patient, and they can be anywhere pretty much on the body, on the face especially, and they are the source of what is called hyposthesia. In other words, you touch them, or you put cold air on them, or you push on them, or you bump against them, and the pain that people would normally feel would be absolutely minimal if they saw it as a pain sensation at all. But in a patient with fibromyalgia, it is a crippling pain that spreads out from the point of the trigger point out in a radiating effect across the muscles in the area. And the doctors thought, like a lot of muscular diseases, well, something's happening to the muscles. And so they took biopsies of the muscles, right? I mean, I did it myself. I biopsied the trigger point, right smack in the area. I mean, you can imagine how that felt, in the area of the greatest pain. And I sent that muscle biopsy off to have a pathologist look at it and come back and say, what's wrong with this muscle? What's wrong with the nerves that are in this muscle? And the answer was, for me and for everybody else, there's absolutely nothing wrong. When you look at this tissue, it is completely normal. And so we were wondering, how on earth can you have something so localized as a trigger point that when you touch it, it causes extraordinary pain, which radiates across another area enough to be able to disable people, when you can't find anything histologically wrong? And from that, it began to be treated almost like it was a psychiatric disorder. And there was enormous skepticism about the reality of this until we developed the ability to take a look at some of the inflammation, the pro-inflammatory mediators that were involved, even though inflammation was not present at the site. The only other place you could get this kind of phenomenon was at the brain. So not as a psychiatric disorder, but there is a thing called the homunculus, and it's an interesting little diagram if you look it up. Homunculus, just like it sounds. And it is a distribution of all of the parts of the body on the sensory cortex of the brain. And if you touch one of these, then you will feel a sensation, because they do it in people with serious epilepsy, etc. They kind of ask them to play along with us, let us learn a little bit about the brain. And they've got a hole in their head to begin with. So then they would touch these areas, and they would have sensations in the various parts of their body of the homunculus as it is represented. So as you can imagine, the lips, which are so heavily supplied with nerves, are gigantic on the homunculus. And there are areas like kneecaps, which are not very well supplied, that are very, very small. So it's a distorted human figure. But what they discovered was that there is a pro-inflammatory, in fact, the strongest pro-inflammatory mediator called cyclooxygenase 2, which in people with fibromyalgia is much more plentiful than it is in somebody without the disease. Now, because the disease is fairly recent, I believe that if we ever get down to understanding the genesis of this, we're going to find that it has to do with something of the environmental toxins that we have in our environment now that didn't exist there before, because fibromyalgia is becoming more and more common. And if there's anything that is true, it is that we're experiencing an increase in the kinds of things that the toxins in our environment will promote in the human body. So the cyclooxygenase 2 was different from the cyclooxygenase 1. We've known about cyclooxygenase 1 for a long time, and aspirins and non-steroidal anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen will look after that, but they won't look after cyclooxygenase 2. And so when we give all of these things that helped with inflammation before, we found didn't help at all. But then they developed some drugs, which were cyclooxygenase 2 drugs, and several of them were put on the market, and they helped with fibromyalgia until they killed the people with fibromyalgia and were withdrawn from the market. They happened to provoke heart attacks, and so they were withdrawn from the market. And there's still one out there called Celebrex, but the side effect profile of Celebrex is such that you would be loath to give it to your dog, no matter in what kind of pain it was in. So we didn't, these cyclooxygenase 2 things disappeared. And there is nothing really effective for the fibromyalgia symptoms at the present time that does not have a side effect profile that would scare the living daylights out of you. So what we discovered is that in animal studies, lo and behold, there are anti-inflammatories from the natural world that seem to be particularly effective at controlling cyclooxygenase 2. And from that, we deduced, because we haven't certainly done the studies on human beings, but we deduced that if this were so, and it helped with the inflammation on cyclooxygenase 1, and it also helped with symptoms that were generated by cyclooxygenase 2, why wouldn't these things perhaps be able to be used by the body? Here I'm talking about nutrients, used by the body to block this particular type of pernicious pro-inflammatory stimulus that was causing this horrible disease. And in my patients long ago, when I started using the mangosteen, I had people flooding into my office as general practice referrals. In other words, my partners in the city who were embarrassed, who were really, not in a position to prescribe a fruit juice because they thought that that was beneath them, quite literally, although I supplied it to many of them under the table. They did not want to be associated with the idea of talking about alternatives as a way of treating a disease, but they all recognized that when I treated their patients who had fibromyalgia, that these patients responded extremely well to providing supplements to their body, and the body was able to use those supplements in such a way that this pernicious entity, fibromyalgia, which completely disabled a large number of people, would come under control. And they got their lives back. And in my mind, in the core product, what we're looking at here is the effect of certain polyphenols, which are called xanthones, that are identified as cyclooxygenase 2 inhibitors. So if you wanted to take a look at the science yourself, you would go to PubMed, you would put in mangosteen, and then you would put COX-2 in, cyclooxygenase 2. And you'll see the studies in animals and in laboratory tests that show that there's a very effective method of controlling the levels of cyclooxygenase 2 that, when in excess, result in pain syndromes, the most pernicious of which is fibromyalgia. So am I surprised that Cheryl had this kind of response? No, because I've seen it about 400 times. So I'm not surprised. Am I surprised that she had it on the smallest dose that she's on of the core? Yes, I was surprised at that. And I think I'm going to say a couple of words about that. The half-life, now by the term half-life, I mean that when you take something into your mouth that is going to be absorbed and beneficial to the body, not a lot of it gets absorbed when you're talking about polyphenols or things from plants. We've talked about that before. It's usually on the order, maximally, of about 5%. So this small amount of stuff, very powerful, it comes across the gut, it gets into the bloodstream, and the body begins to use it for the things that it can use it for. In this case, reducing the pro-inflammatory elements that are there. Then you get an effect and a blood level that is temporary, because in 3.5 hours, half of it's gone. And in the next 3.5 hours, half of that is gone. So it means that in 7 hours after you have taken a single dose of the core, you only have 1/4 of what was absorbed in your body still. So it isn't an ideal way to look after serious problems that require attention and a certain level of the effectiveness, the effective thing that you're taking into your body, the polyphenol, to be around. So I suggested to Cheryl that if she was having tremendous effect with the amount that she was having, if she took it twice a day, she would double that likely blood level that she would get over a period of 11 days, because there are first order pharmacokinetics that are involved, and the calculation is difficult to make, but it means that approximately after taking it twice a day for 11 days, you've now got blood levels, and that if you continue on a few days later, you may be able to accumulate tissue levels. So the ideal way to deal with this for chronic illness, where you want to have a blood level and perhaps a tissue level to get the maximum benefit of the things that you're taking in, you would want to take the core 2 or 3 times a day. Now, you don't get up in the middle of the night to take your 4th dose, which would be ideal, but you always take it with food, morning, evening, and in the midday, and you will get a more rapid response and a more durable response. And if you had a partial response, the likelihood is that you will have an even greater response when you start to get this into your system. So that's what I would say about fibromyalgia and about the frequency of the dosing of the core, in order to get the ingredients that are there, which the body can use to enormous effect, and much better, in my experience, than the drugs that are out there. You know, when you gave drugs to people, you could be sure you were going to make some of them sicker than they were when they came in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's go on ahead, Dr. Tibble. We've got Julie Ellis on the line with us also. And Julie, at the same time, has had some pain issues due to an accident, actually, that she had. And Julie comes all the way from Canada. Julie, thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, Julie, your accident was with a tree, right?
It was, yes.
So tell us, Julie, tell us about your accident, what happened, and what you've been going through.
Well, first of all, I've had pain in my knee on and off since I was a teen, but it was never consistent. It was just kind of once in a while it would bother me. And then in August of 2015, so it's coming up on 3 years ago, I had a really freak accident with a huge oak tree that fell after a storm. And it hit me and it threw me. And that's no feat, because at the time I weighed close to 270 pounds. And yeah, it threw me and flipped me over. I have no idea how far I got thrown because nobody saw it. Everybody had their back to me. And I landed on my shoulder, my arm, and I completely twisted over and landed on my kind of my side and my front. And I was in excruciating pain. Somehow I knew I hadn't broken anything. I don't know how, but I just knew that. And I just laid there trying to breathe, and I was holding the grass in the ground, literally digging at it because I was in that much pain. And then I rolled over and everybody's like staring at me going, oh my God, I was cut. I had short boots on, and I was cut from the top of the boots all the way up to my inner thigh. And I couldn't move. So I kind of just took it easy for the rest of the day. Like a stubborn person, I did not go to the hospital. I was just going to kind of hold out and not do anything. So what happened though, and I have to say somebody had to be watching over me, because I didn't get hit in the head. I didn't get impaled by this tree. Somebody had to be watching over me for me just to have this. But what did happen is I had very, very deep bruising. And I'm going to share these with you. I've been sharing these with many people. But I don't know if you can see that, but that's my arm.
Mm.
And this is my leg.
Oh, wow.
The bruising was still there 5 months later. I went for an ultrasound. I did go to the doctors, and they sent me for x-rays, and they didn't really show anything. So I was sent for an ultrasound. By the time I got it, it was 5 months later, and you could see in the ultrasound, and I could feel it, all the lumps that were still in my leg from how deep the bruising was. And they ended up sending me for an MRI and then to a surgeon. And I did find out that I need a knee replacement, but at 46, at the time I was only 43, they won't do one. My knee is now sitting like this. It's supposed to be like this, and it's like this. I've lost all the cushioning in my knee, and I couldn't walk. I couldn't walk across a lawn because it was uneven, and it would jar it, and it would hurt. The other thing is that my leg was so swollen, my left knee started hurting 7 weeks later, and it took 7 weeks for the swelling to go down enough for me to feel it. I thought it was from compensating because I couldn't walk straight because of the other knee, and it wasn't. It was injured as well. I just didn't realize it. So I had to take stairs like a toddler. I had to hold on. I couldn't go up and down the stairs. So I was doing 1 foot, 1 foot, 1 foot, 1 foot, and I couldn't push off. And so I couldn't carry anything up and down the stairs. And it was really frustrating. I worked on the 2nd floor of a farmhouse in an office building, and I couldn't do it. So it took about 2 years for all of that to heal and for me to feel well enough that I could kind of walk and do anything. So I started exercising earlier this year. I've been working really, really hard, and I have lost just over 90 pounds, but I still had knee pain. And because my knee is not aligned properly anymore, I did a wall sit with a group that's doing it at work every day. They started at 10 seconds and got up to like 1.5 minutes. And that tried to change the alignment of my knee, and I had pain and swelling again in it. So luckily, just a couple of weeks later, we had the road show, and Ryan and Stacy came up and introduced us to these wonderful products, and I put in an order. And to my surprise, after 3 days of taking this, the swelling was gone from my knee, and I've had no pain.
Wow.
None. And this past weekend, I walked my butt all over Nashville, and I was getting 22 to 24,000 steps a day. I was doing the stairs, and I've had no pain.
Is that something you would have been able to have done before?
I couldn't go up from my basement to my main level in my house. So absolutely not. It's like for the last 2.5 years, I've been lucky to get 5,000 or 6,000 steps in a day. I couldn't do it. It hurt too much.
That's incredible. Dr. Templeman, talk to us. Tell us what's going on. What such drastic changes here? We're dealing with pain again. What's happening?
Well, Julie has inflammation from a different source. When the trauma takes place, like I explained previously with Cheryl, we believe that her inflammation, which is felt in the, which is in the central nervous system, but which is felt in the periphery or in the body, is probably due to toxins. In Julie's case, it's the kind of bruising that we all experience. It's just being beat up in a physical sense. And she had these incredible bruises, which would go right down to the bone and actually bruise probably the layer of fibrous tissue, which is around the bone, which is called the periosteum, and would have blood accumulation, not only in the tissues, which are the lumps she could feel, but actually bone bruises, where the periosteum would be lifted off of the bone because of the tremendous bruising that went on in the displacement of tissue. Now, her major element would have been a COX-1 mediated and tumor necrosis factor alpha, another pro-inflammatory element of importance that is extremely pro-inflammatory. And those two things we know are blocked again by some of the elements that are in the mangosteen. So if you ask me, am I surprised? No, I'm not surprised, because I've seen it about 400 times before. But I am very happy that Julie was able to find relief with a single stick of core. And I suggested to her, I think, that she ought to be trying it up to 2 and 3 times a day and see if she can't get some of the other systemic benefits that will go along with it, as long as some of the residual things. And it's interesting for those of us who live in the United States to imagine that you have to wait 3 months for some of the processes, or be told that because you're either over 70 and can't have a bypass, or that you're under 55 or 65 and can't have a knee replacement, even if it's completely indicated, you can thank your lucky stars that you live where you do. The fact is that there are advantages to the Canadian system. People get very good primary care in Canada, and in the United States, some people hang around with conditions that they can't afford to go and see a doctor for the first time. And so when they do eventually go, it's a real complicated situation. So there are pros and cons on both sides, but I'm glad that I live on this side of the border as far as being able to get a hold of the advanced kind of things that go on. But I don't mean to make this a political commentary. What I do need to say is that when you get bruised, when you get beaten up, when you fall, when you stretch or strain or go to the gym and overdo it, you get a different kind of inflammation than the kind that Cheryl had. And that the mangosteen elements are just as effective at helping the body to block those inflammatory pathways as they are with the ones that Julie had. And so do we see incredible stuff like this? Well, I was there at that convention, and it was an exercise in astonishment for me. First of all, I have never seen 1,800 women only, because there wasn't a man there unless it was the husband of some of the people that were there. And when you take the male ballast out of an audience like that, you have got reservoirs, quantum leaps in the kind of enthusiasm that you can see and experience. It was a real revelation for me to see the female power. I mean, you could have cut the estrogen with a knife in the air, but the fact of the matter was that there was an incredible amount of enthusiasm. And I spent my time over the 4 days that we were there, largely sequestered, talking to people one-on-one, perhaps more than 100 of them, about their experiences with these products and about the problems that they had, which they hoped, if they hadn't been able to get a hold of the products, they were going to feel relief from. And I came away from there feeling very, very enthusiastic about the kind of help that these people are going to get by taking nutritional attributes, that, in other words, supplements that are going to be able to help their body do a better job at repairing itself when it's broken, at protecting itself when it isn't damaged yet, and being able to benefit in a very real way by being able to exercise, eat properly, and optimize their health. And I think that Julie is a perfect example of this. Now, Julie and Cheryl both were striking examples, but I met at least 10 or 11 people with horrific stories, which hopefully we'll be able to hear some of them, and the results that they had from the core. It's a remarkable product. As I suggested to everybody when I was talking to them, it is the mangosteen, and it is the most powerful form of the mangosteen that is available on the market today. And it's available at a price that makes it the equivalent of going out and buying a soda. It really is striking what we have here with the targeted nutrition that the M products bring to the market, we can give you benefits that you can't find even in medication at times, and we can do it for the price of a soda. So I'm thrilled that Julie and Cheryl have been able to have relief from their situations. I'm thrilled that the other people I spoke to who have had relief are going to be able to talk about that. And then I'm thrilled at the dozens of people whom I spoke to. I said, look, try it. You're likely going to be amazed at the consequences of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that when you give the core in adequate amounts to people who have chronic illness, that about 60% of them are going to respond in a relatively short period of time, 2 to 3 weeks, some of them within days, but they're going to respond with some identifiable, something that they can tell you very clearly what it is that's happened to them that's beneficial. And I'm not sure that you can do that with most medications. So am I excited? Absolutely, I'm excited. Julie and Cheryl are representative of a group of people that have come into the M fold that are going to dynamitely, like dynamite, going to explode the energy of this company. It's going to bring about some problems. We may run out of core. We may run out of M3Z, but we are surely happy to have you there. And by the way, a pitch for Peterborough, where Julie lives, one of the most beautiful areas in the Kawarthas in Ontario, a wonderful place to go and take a vacation and catch some big fish.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you know, it really is. This is an incredible time with some incredible products that don't just make a difference, but products that just totally change lives. And that's what we're seeing. And the stories that we're hearing continuously with each one of our products, especially the Coreo, which is the mangosteen-based product that is just totally changing people's lives in a drastic way. And the best thing to say is, if you haven't tried it yet, you need to try it. And just wait and see what it does for you, as we're seeing here. Julie, Cheryl, thank you so much. Anything else you guys have to say real quick? We're going to wrap it up here, but is there anything else that you want to say as we go out?
Just thank you. It has definitely changed my life. It is unbelievable.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Dr. Templeman, any final words before we close?
Yeah, I just want to take my hat off to Julie, who has lost 90 pounds. I'll tell you that losing weight on that level is as hard as changing your hair color with your mind. And so I know how hard it's been, Julie. And if you've got more to lose, I wish you the best. We've got some great products that will help you.
Yes, absolutely. So if you want to catch the recording of this, if you want to share it, it's going to be up on the M Network YouTube channel probably later this evening, or at least by tomorrow morning. And also, we will have a whole lot more calls that are scheduled this week. We've got tomorrow night. Tuesday night is the business call that we have, which is at the same time this was. We also have the cat call on Thursday evenings. And then on Saturday mornings, Dennis and Sue Ligon, they do another business call with us. And then on Monday mornings, or late morning, early afternoon for some, Andy Willoughby does is getting the week started with his Monday morning call. But you can find the schedule of different calls going on either at mnetworkcalls.com or a larger view of some others, and all together at empowerplan.com. And again, to catch the recordings, you can go to the M Network YouTube channel. And I'm going to give a little precursor right now, and that is that next week on the call, you're going to want to be tuning in, because we're going to be talking about, I'm not going to give it all away, but we've got this whole thing with Jamberry and M Network and what's going on, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the product end of that next week. So make sure that you're tuning in next week to find out, what is all this snail stuff? what is it? What is this? What's this about? Wraps? What am I wrapping? There we are. You can look at, some of these the beautiful things that are happening there. We're going to talk about that. And what does that mean? What does that mean for you? And some of those things that are already available. Obviously, if you're Jamberry, you've been having access to this already, and you've got limited access to the M products, and you're going to be getting more access here very, very soon. Same thing with those that have been with the M sticks. You've had access to all the M products, and now you have access, if you don't know it, in your back office, you've got access to some of the Jamberry stuff with a Jamberry starter kit. So you can go check that out, because that's what we're going to be talking about next week. And you're going to want to know application. There's some things about it that you're going to want to know so that you're aware of how it works and what it does, so that you're all on top of that. So just a little teaser of what's going to be coming next week. And don't forget, make sure that you're getting your products in the Choreo. And as far as taking with food, I know one of the questions was, well, what is it? How often do you take it? And the suggestion, is 2 to 3 times a day. If you take it with meals, you're going to get the most benefit from it. If you're like me, I don't remember to always take it with a meal. You're still getting the benefit at least 60%. You may not get 100% benefit of all the stuff that's in there, but you're at least getting about 60% of the benefit. You want the full benefit, make sure you're taking it with a meal. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll talk to you all next week. Have a great night.